एक छोटी मोटी कप कोई बात प्यारी प्यारी जाए दिल में तो छाप आजा कर गप शप कोई बात ले चला कुछ मुझे सीख कुछ मुझको सिखा विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे प्यारी प्यारी जाए दिल में तो छाप आजा कर गप शप कोई बात ले चला.
Bharat Murthy plays in many spaces. He's a comics historian and a creator of comics. And although he's also an author, a documentary filmmaker, a producer of comics books, editor of the magazine Vérité, and he organizes comics festivals in India, his true love, he says, is sitting at his desk and drawing. Bharat is not only a comics historian, but he's himself creating the history of comics in India. He is presently teaching at the Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology in Bangalore. Do listen to this crazy, wonderful conversation I had with him about his life and his times. Enjoy. Hello, hello! Welcome you guys to the episode of Theatre of Joy, the podcast. Today we have Bharat Murthy. Bharat Murthy, the part that I like from his resume is that he is a comics historian. And he was born in 1978, and very soon after that, he was on to comics and copying from comics. And also he found stuff, because there was no internet at that time. He found stuff which many of us didn't. We were all on to Tintin and Asterix maybe, but there's a lot more, and there's a lot different kind of genres. And he is at present, he is teaching at the Srishti Manipal Institute of Art, Design and Technology, which is a premier institute in design, and a person who has been working with cartoons is there, and that excites me a lot. He also taught at the Film and Television Institute of India, because he studied at the Film Institute in Calcutta. Would you tell us the name, Bharat?
Satyajit Ray Film and Television.
The Satyajit Ray Film Institute in Calcutta. He's a filmmaker, he's a cartoonist, he works in graphics, and his first graphic novel, I don't know what you like to call it, was published by HarperCollins. And there's a huge list of publications, different kinds of publications. He does workshops which teach people how to do this art form. And he has participated in exhibitions, in art galleries, and so much more. You heard a little bit in the introduction. And without wasting any time, let's go on to Bharat Murthy. I'm so excited, Bharat, for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It is, when I was researching and looking at your profile on the internet, whatever, it expanded my world. There's so much that I didn't know about your sphere of expertise, and very, very interesting. And I'm so grateful. And I'm going to now go back to reading, say, Neil Gaiman and Ajit Neenan, and looking at all the stuff that we grew up and took for granted as children.
Right.
And especially I would love to hear about the manga connection. Manga is please tell everyone what is manga. That is your camera.
Well, manga is simply the Japanese word for comics. Put it as simply as possible. So manga is, a single panel cartoon is also manga, and a 2000 page tome
is also
is
manga.
also manga. Yeah. So manga is a generic word for Japanese comics, and within manga there are lots of other Japanese words, but they, you know.
And you stumbled upon manga very young, right?
I stumbled upon manga because I was not very young. In fact, I would make the conjecture that most Indians, even in art schools, like when I was in art school, for sure, nobody knew about manga. Like neither the teachers nor the
I'm
students.
sure. I also
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
Of
yeah.
course, I've enjoyed Japanese anime films
Yeah.
on Netflix and other
Right.
places.
And it, of course, it was a very sophisticated scene already in Japan.
But wait. Your journey
Yeah.
as a graphic artist,
Yeah.
is how, if we were to put it in one word, which would be tough for me, what would you call yourself?
I would call myself a comics author.
Uh-huh.
A comics author.
Uh-huh.
I prefer to use the word comics.
Yes, I know. I
Yeah.
thought so.
The graphic novel, well, one can say graphic novelist as well.
Yes.
But comics is again like manga, like the word manga is a generic word, and it fits all kinds of forms of expression within comics.
Yes, yes, I see that.
So
Yeah.
so you can call even a 500-page novel a comic, like a graphic novel is also a comic, and a single comic strip that appears in a newspaper is also a comic.
But there are connotations like
Yeah.
comic and
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get there.
We'll get there.
First, tell us about your, as a child, as a young person.
I was born in Ahmedabad, and as a child, I would copy, because the Times of India newspaper would come
Yes,
every
I
day,
know.
and I was fascinated by the political cartoons. You said it, by R.K. Lakshman. I was fascinated by the cartoon in the newspaper.
So lucky as a country, we all grew up with
Yeah,
at least our generation.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that. And so I would actually copy the entire cartoon exactly in brush, and including the signature at the bottom.
Yeah, he had a very
Yeah. He had a flourish.
typical kind of a
Yeah,
signature.
signature. So I would copy the entire cartoon and the signature, which is a part of the picture. And
How old were you then?
I was about 6, 7, 8.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Because they were so attractive.
Yes.
Because there was a world that was being conjured up.
I know.
And so I would copy that, and I would copy Ajit Nainan. I would copy Mario Miranda. I would copy Atanu Roy.
I know.
These were all from the Target magazine. One of the best, I think, still the best children's magazine that
It no longer exists, right?
no longer exists.
Yeah.
It shut shop in the 90s, mid 90s, post liberalization and all that. But in the 80s, as I was growing up, that it was a very formative influence. Some of the country's best cartoonists worked for the magazine. So they had little 2-page comics in the magazine. So there would be a Detective Moochwala, there would be Garzad Das, and I should mention Jayanto Banerjee, who is the cartoonist of Garzad Das, and Singing Donkey.
Acha.
So,
I missed that,
yeah,
I think.
these are, yeah. So these comics, these were, I would copy all of them, and gradually, as I grew up, that faded because there were no comics that one could read
And enjoy.
enjoy after a certain age. Like
So the
once
comics were for children.
they were for children, and we thought they were for children. Like, thought they were children's form, and it was only for children. Or you had, on the other extreme, you had the political cartoon, which was for adults. But that was satire, and it had a particular kind of structure. That was not for children, but they were not stories.
Mm.
They were just statements and comments, which was commentary. So you only had these two extremes. You didn't have stories for youth.
Young adults, yeah.
Yeah, young adults. You did have superhero comics, say Raj comics in Hindi, and I mean they were imitations of American superhero comics. That existed, and there were other, again, Diamond comics, again for kids, Pran, Chacha Chaudhary, and all those. They were for kids. But for youth, you had some options, which was like something like Raj Comics. But other than that, you didn't have a wide variety of storytelling for like a age group between, say, 16 to 30. Once you grew up.
You know, before you were born, I remember now reading comics in the 60s, you know, phase, which were, of course, foreign comics.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, they were foreign comics.
They
Yeah.
kind of stopped and dried out, I think. After
Yeah. They were foreign comics. I mean,
Commando.
Yeah. Yeah, these war comics were there. Yeah. And there was also the standard Tintin, Asterix, and other European comics. So there was certainly access to certain kinds of European American comics, but manga was, I mean, none of us knew anything about manga.
That's another world.
Yeah, that's another world. So there was no access. So the way I got into manga was when I was studying film at Calcutta.
And you kept copying.
I kept drawing, but the drawing, because when you say you draw, then the first thing is, okay, why don't you study art? so it becomes about visual art rather than,
which you did actually,
which
in
I did.
Baroda.
Yeah, I studied painting. Of course, it didn't satisfy me because somewhere I always wanted to do cartooning and comics. But there were no spaces for comics at the time, and even the existing spaces were drying up because magazines like Target, even the children's magazines, were shutting down, and even Amar Chitrakatha was bankrupt, in fact, and it was bought over, revived.
And then Tinkle came.
Yeah, Tinkle always existed. Tinkle was there since the 80s, early 80s, along with Target at the same time. But it was dying, and it was revived by new venture capitalist or investor from the US. They Indians, I forgot his name. But so they bought over the company, and the company has been kept alive. And now it's of course doing well, but a lot of the material is reprints of the old stuff, even today. So my the exposure to manga gave me this understanding that I could that the potential of the medium is really big, but it's underexploited in India. And so I wanted to so it became a thing for me to demonstrate, to try and demonstrate the potential of the medium. So I deliberately took up subject matter that no one would otherwise
know
touch.
about.
Yeah. And do it in comics. So, okay, we can do this kind of thing in comics as well. So that became a kind of a mission for me.
So you're not only a comics historian, but you actually created history.
Well, I would say that I had to start becoming a historian of comics, in quotes. I don't consider myself a historian, but a kind of a historian, because there was really no history to the medium in India. So I wrote an essay, in fact, which is called An Art Without a Tradition. That was an essay published in Mag magazine in the days when comics were not taken seriously at all by
Yeah, and
established.
parents yelled at the kids, if I see you
Yeah.
reading a comic.
Yeah. It was always seen as something of a
Low art, not even art, I
yeah,
think.
not even
Just,
art. It didn't
yeah,
have the status of art
art
at
at
all.
all. Yeah.
It was something that you did surreptitiously.
Yeah.
It was seen as a as an expression of things that one should not express.
Yeah.
The stuff that is taboo
Yeah.
and kept, under the carpet.
And not an art form at all, because if kids took to, like, I used to also little scribble, copy from just very little.
Mhm.
And I was told, why don't you go to an art school?
Exactly. I was told the same, which is why I went to art school. So, yeah. So, and then, so because there were in fact, no schools to learn cartooning, it was always thought that the cartoonist or the comics artist is some kind of self-taught person, and they just came with this kind of expression, and you made use of them wherever. That was the understanding. So because there were no schools, for me, my entry into comics was via cinema. So because
The close up, the long shot.
yeah, because that's also visual narrative.
Yeah.
And the conventions of the cinema are very much a part of the expression of in comics. And in fact, comics are very, very close to cinema, because you have even sound.
Yes, of course. Yes.
In comics, you have sound effects.
Yeah.
So there is a visual as well as sound, and
Yeah.
it's something I like to emphasize, because it's only in comics, in the comics medium, that you have sound as a visual element.
Like in anime, you mean? In animated films?
No, in the comics medium. So
Oh,
you
yes,
have
the
sound
boom and the
effects.
yeah,
Boom
yeah,
and the
yeah.
bang. All these words
And
that you
people
make
created
up.
those blurbs with
Yeah.
different kinds of
Yeah. So sound effects is a huge part, particularly in manga. In manga, for instance, there is even a sound effect for silence.
There is.
Yeah. So when there is silence in the air, like say a pause, silence, they use a word called shu.
Oh, and they had to find something
and
because the
right.
culture is
Yeah.
such.
Yeah.
They.
So the word is there in. It's used as a sound effect.
Oh, wow.
But it's an interesting
anybody
paradox that you for silence you have a sound.
Sound. Yeah.
I thought it's very cute.
Yeah.
It's a interesting creative thing.
Yes.
But that's comics.
Yeah.
To me, that really encapsulates the medium.
Which makes me think that people who actually did comics later on also had to be very creative, because they had to come up with all these kind of like in the films and everywhere.
Yeah. There were
language.
No real, you had to come up with it, because there were no real conventions that were given to you.
Yeah.
That's why I said an art without a tradition. That was my first impression of what comics were, as coming as a historian. Okay, historian in the sense trying to find what the history of Indian comics is. So one had to. I mean, we're still doing that. There's still no or culturally accepted conventions in the comics, in Indian comics. So people try all kinds of things, and that is good. That is good at the moment, because at least you are starting to see diversity in the form.
But let's go back to comics. The magazine that you started, is that am I right?
Yeah. So I since there were no spaces, I had to, okay, now that I've made a comic, where do I publish it?
And you made history.
So I had to really then think about, okay, how do I put it together? So again, it was online. Friends got together, and we said, okay, let's put out an anthology together. You make short comics and you make a book out of it. And it was a time when these digital printing, uh, digitally printed books were becoming popular. That you could get just one copy of a book done, and of course they were expensive, but at least you could have a
Yeah.
book uh, without going through a publisher. So self-publishing as an idea attracted me a lot, and that's again coming from my experience of manga in Japan, where I had the opportunity to make a film, a feature
The
documentary.
Fragility of Moe?
Yeah, the Fragile Heart of
The
Moe.
Fragile Moe.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very clunky title, I admit, but
No,
in Japanese the title is just Moe no Shinzo, which is Heart of Moe, which we thought we expanded into English as the Fragile Heart of Moe. Moe is a Japanese word. It means budding love, like budding love. And it's a kind of phenomenon in Japanese comics where you kind of fall in love with you're falling in love with a fictional character, and that sense of falling in love with a fictional character in comics is you're getting moe for it, moe. So that it's a feeling, an emotion for fiction, for a fictional character. That sort of thing.
Yeah, we all fall in love with fictional characters.
Right. And in comics, it's a very it takes on particular forms, and because you you start drawing the character, and you may want to dress like the character, and you may want to think of other stories in which the character is, and so you start making those kind of stories. So in fact, the world's largest comics festival, which is in Japan, called Comiket, many of the works are parodies, what they call parodies, but they are in fact
you take a character.
You take a character, existing character, and you make new stories with them.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so that's sort of
so
material.
much creativity, and so can be a vast world for children, for young people.
Sure, absolutely, and for people of all ages. And so that really struck me. That was a transformative event for me, the visit to Japan. And I thought that so we should have something similar, maybe, which self-publishing. So then we started a comics festival called Indie Comix Fest, which happens in a few Indian cities.
It still
year.
happens?
It still happens.
Oh my goodness!
So since 2017, we've been doing it, and so in October, November this season, we'll start in October.
I'm going to the next one.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. We just had one at Max Muller in Delhi a couple of months ago. So
it happens twice a year.
It happens. It
once
depends.
Or twice.
Yeah, once or twice, depending on how it's all voluntary. So depending on
whoever comes together.
comes together. So and that has been growing. So my magazine also is part of this whole thing of trying to make trying to publish comics together. Not really. I mean, doesn't make any money. it's a very small independent publishing establishment as of now. But certainly something that I would like to do is start a magazine, which could be a bi-monthly or eventually a monthly, where you have comics being regularly published, which don't really exist as of now. Comics for a general audience, general readership, like all ages, not just for children. So that is something that I want to do. So that has been the journey in the magazine space.
I can think of a good future in that, because graphic novels are, people are.
It's growing.
It's
growing. Definitely growing. It's definitely growing, and I can see, at least from the space devoted in bookshops to comics. So that is growing year on year. So I'm pretty sure that there'll be a time when you will have regular magazines which are publishing only comics,
Hmm.
all kinds of comics. So that is something that I look forward to for sure. And
So
yeah,
yeah, your particular journey is interesting because I've read some interviews that you have given. You know, first there was the line, a writer who draws,
a writer who draws
you know,
now.
and the shadows and what was that?
Substance and shadow.
Substance and shadows.
Right.
So tell us about your maturing as a person, as as a person who does comics, as an artist.
As an artist.
And what really interested me was something that I read when you said that a cartoon. I don't know now. These words confuse me. Comic, cartoon, but a graphic, which is before people add color to it, and that whole thing was so interesting. Actually, I was just reading it before you came, so I didn't really finish it. But
As in the black and white.
yeah, and adding the color is actually sort of obfuscating a little. That's what I got.
That
So
was.
tell us about your journey as you matured as an artist.
Well, for me, I was always trying to find space within our visual culture, and I wanted to try and see how comics fit in uh, into the history of Indian visual art. And I, in fact, want to make a very rhetorical claim that it is, in fact, comics that are the true legatees of Indian visual narrative art. That rather than modern Indian art, as opposed to modern Indian art.
That's a very interesting thought. Yeah.
Because historically Indian visual art has always been narrative focused mainly. In fact, they're all, practically everything is narrative focused. The material is coming from stories
and mythology, mostly myths.
Myths. So the myths are stories, a kind of story, but stories nonetheless.
So just what would be graphic art which is not based on narrative?
Where you're say for instance portraiture, say for instance landscape painting,
Even cartoons in newspapers,
caricatures,
caricatures,
where you're not really telling a story but you're doing caricature, and other kinds of, say, poster graphic art, illustration. So illustration is you're there in between painting and comics. This space, this is other space of illustration. And of course you could call much of Indian Indian visual art illustration of a kind, because they are illustrating um, existing material. I mean, in fact, you don't have much portraiture until the Mughal period. You don't have realistic portraiture, though people could do it. It's not that they could not. It's not like they couldn't do it, but it was not a form that was really encouraged in painting. So you always had storytelling, and again, storytelling in sequence. That is what I wanted to emphasize. So when you say
kind of a linear.
So there is a narrative progression in the sequence of images. Like even if you go to Ajanta, they're all illustrations of the Jatakas, which are the birth stories, past life stories of the Buddha as the Bodhisattva. So so various lives that the Buddha has led, and leading to the current life as Siddhartha Gautama. He's born as a human and then he becomes a Buddha. So that's his last life.
We have to talk about your book also.
Yeah, all right. So again, comics and Buddhism has been a part of my journey, so to speak. Since you asked about maturing as an artist, I kind of wanted to connect myself to that legacy of Buddhist art, because well, the oldest imagery we have is from Ajanta, existing, surviving imagery, and that's been
You
called
know,
Buddhist.
it's not usually talked about. I don't know, or maybe I didn't hear it. The Ajanta connection with Jataka tales.
Well, all the Ajanta paintings are Jataka tales. Yeah, they're all Jataka tales. And only the last few caves, of course, there is sculpture of the Buddha's life itself. So the Buddha's life is also material for artists. That story, the life of the Buddha, that has always been inspiration for artists. But the Jatkas have been popular, popular visual, part of the popular visual culture forever. So it was through the Jatkas that people actually got access to Buddhist ideas. And so Ajanta, so no wonder that they chose the Jatkas to paint on the walls. And so that is a visual narrative tradition that I think is very closely related to comics, because of this sequential nature of the and that there is a storyteller who, you just got the visuals, somebody telling the story. So it is also a lot like cinema, because of course in the cave you would have to light it up, you would have a fire, and that only lights parts of the cave, and so you have to move the torch. And because the cave is dark, and so there is also a movement from one part of the wall to the other part of the wall, and so you are kind of creating a sense of movement through the connecting of visuals,
which is
so there's
going to be a different podcast. There's so much. I know.
So for me, as since you put it, come back to your question, the way I'm trying to do comics is to deliberately keep myself connect myself to this history of Indian visual art, and I want to make those links stronger and stronger.
Wow,
That's
amazing.
That's something that I'm trying to do, because in fact, as I told you, I started by saying that it's an art without a tradition. Where the essay that I had written while I was studying comics, Indian comics history, I was trying to create a history of Indian comics. So where I had said that it's an art without a tradition, but then now over the years, I want to make the links to the past stronger. So I don't see Indian comics as a purely modern expression. I want to link it to the past as well, so that there is a dialogue with the history of visual art.
And actually, the visual medium is also got not that much attention, because our schools, they hardly teach.
Like in art class in schools,
original expression in the visual media, they don't
no,
teach
they don't. And comics would be seen as a,
No.
like you don't do that.
No.
You do a painting of maybe, say, a portrait, or you might make some religious figure. You might do those kind of or some landscape, or drawing animals maybe, or decorative arts.
And it looks so much like real life. I mean, that's the compliment one is given, which is
so
not
much,
the point.
That's right. It's so realistic. So realistic is what everybody
which brings me to the process of drawing something.
Right. Right.
without any, without any idea about that, okay, it's for the market, people should like it, my mom should like it,
Yeah.
just the process of a child sitting and,
Yeah.
or a young person or an old
Yeah.
person sitting
Yeah.
and drawing.
Yeah. And in fact, when children draw,
Mm.
usually they start telling some kind of a story.
Yeah. Even very little children.
Yeah, very little
I
children.
remember the first time my daughter made something which looked like a mandir.
Mhm.
And she said, I mean, little kid. So then I remember that we had gone to visit, but she was so little that it was surprising that a little child could also.
Yeah, and so she wanted to kind of show that process of her.
I mean, it was just noting her expression, like she was a historian in her own right.
Right,
and
right.
her
Making
own.
this kind of a personal history.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is something we noticed recently in the self-published comics in India, like at these Indie Comix Fest events, that a lot of the comics done by young people tend to be autobiographical. And they're trying to talk about themselves, which I find very encouraging. And so it is everyone trying to, so even my own work included. I started by doing that kind of thing. And I think that's an important part of trying to be you, and you want to present yourself in a historical way. That is, you want to put your personal history,
your story out.
Yeah, out there.
And it's interesting, children are encouraged to draw from real life, and these things are dismissed.
Yeah.
They're not even looked at.
Yeah, it is not even
doesn't make sense.
Considered. Yeah. This telling a story through visuals is in fact suppressed. Yeah. You do an individual picture, and the more realistic it is, the better. That has been the traditional idea.
And as Kunal Kamra says, you have to be like someone.
Yeah,
in order to
be
just
like
be.
someone. Yeah, you have to be like someone. So there is a kind of a model, a convention of what is a good picture, and children are then kind of asked to come up to that level of that good picture. And the good picture is you,
or you're dismissed.
Yeah.
Picture is dismissed.
or the picture is dismissed. If
Mango purple थोड़ी होते हैं.
exactly.
Kind of a thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So in these ways, I think comics can be a real intervention within visual culture in India, and can be a very
good medium of study. I mean, education.
Yeah, in enabling young people to say stuff that they would not otherwise say.
Yeah. I mean, that happens when you really get screwed up, and then you're taken to a psychologist who won't ask you to draw.
Then they ask you to draw.
I know.
Then they ask you to draw. Then they do art therapy.
Art therapy.
Right.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So even the comic strip, for instance, like just the newspaper strip, which I feel is a very ignored form by the establishment, the newspaper establishment in India, because people do strips and you have them online.
But they buy them from foreign, what do you call it?
So the newspapers buy syndicated foreign comic strips, and you still have Beetle Bailey and
I know. Bringing up father.
Yeah, Bringing Up Father and Garfield or whatever. But there are so many. I mean, those spaces could easily be replaced by Indian strips.
And there are Indian.
There are many people doing it.
But that's what they would say. कि नहीं नहीं यार वो है नहीं है कोई. Probably because they have to employ them or give them their whatever. These can be just bought.
Yeah, these are just bought, and there's a bulk amount that they pay, and it's a kind of a licensing fee.
Mm.
And so they just get content. They don't even have to think about what are we going to do with this space in the newspaper. But that is a
But
space.
you know, if Indian cartoonists got together
Yeah,
and build a sort of a something that would make it more easeful for newspapers
to
and
get, yeah, to
or
get the
even
content.
online, what do you
Yeah,
call it?
that needs to be done.
That
That
needs
needs
to
to be
be
done.
done.
In fact, they tried it
Mm.
once, and which was a short-lived effort.
Mm.
But Anant Pai, the one who started Amar Chitakatha,
Mm.
he also started in syndicating an Indian cartoon syndicate called Rang Rekha Features.
Really?
Yeah. And where he would supply comic strips to some newspapers. It was
Actually, I think this is a good subject for venture capitalists to sort of invest in.
for sure.
And I'm sure
I
now
have
they
done
would be
my-
open.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And well, I did my own little bit even in this space where the new Indian Express newspaper, which is South Indian Express, um, uh, they said, okay, why don't you curate a Sunday page, like a full page of cartoons. So I did it for a short time. So we had every Sunday there would be only Indian comic strips. And
Wow.
yeah, 5 or 6 of them covering the entire page.
And then they took out the art and culture page.
Yeah, then yeah, exactly. So I did try. I did try. In fact, even the Vanished Path, this graphic, what I call a graphic travelogue. Yeah, it's a book length comic.
This is the Vanished Path, which we will talk about now.
We can talk about it now,
Yes,
because
yes.
in fact, the origin, it began as a as serialized content for a newspaper. So yeah, that was the starting point for the book. So I had suggested to the New Indian Express that, okay, this was the Dinamalar, the Tamil newspaper, and they wanted to publish it in Tamil, in fact. And I was in Coimbatore, and so I said we could do a supplement, a weekly supplement. They have a children's supplement. So I said you could have a like 3 short comic stories, which are serialized, and they come as a supplement every week. And so this project was the Vanished Path was what I proposed as my contribution. And so they gave me some money to travel. And and so we traveled, me and my partner of the time. We traveled, and then I started doing these 10 pages. And again, that was a short-lived experiment.
But it gave rise to the book.
It gave rise to the book. So I said, I have to complete this, of course, since I've started it. And that's how the book came about.
Yeah, so talk about your Buddhist experience then. I mean,
okay.
And how it connects with your art.
How it connects. Well, I was interested in the Buddhist part by itself, in itself, since my college days, because I was reading up a lot on Indian history, and it was interesting to me. But I saw this big like gap in my own understanding, because it was pretty evident that this Buddhist, the Buddhist past is a huge part of our history,
and our making of a culture also.
Oh, the making of the culture. Yeah, yeah. It all began there, in many ways. And so, in fact, Indian history, recorded history, if you have to go to the sources, they're all Buddhist sources. Other than that, you only have the Vedas
Mm.
and Upanishads, which is technically not historical material.
Yeah.
But you have the Pali texts, the Pali corpus, which, of course, they have preserved the old Prakrit in that. The only old Indian language other than Sanskrit that's preserved is the Pali suttas, Tripitaka as I call them, and that is in dialogue form. It's not in verse form, and it's in fact reportage. That is the form in which they are written, because they all begin with evam me sutam. That is, thus have I heard.
Oh,
So that is the opening line of every sutta. Sutta is sutra, but they're all in text form. And so that is to say that it is being coded as reportage. I heard this from someone, and I'm reporting this to you, to the reader. So it's a passing on of what I have heard. So it is it is not presented as the word of some.
We hear a lot about the Vedas and all, but this is not commonly known.
Commonly known. Like even the word Tripitaka is an odd word. Nobody would know it.
Yeah.
But that
and
is
it's become an isolated, esoteric kind of a thing,
as if it's
which actually it made us all.
Yeah, exactly. So I got interested in this this aspect of Indian history, and then that led also, because I was interested in the visual art, the history of visual art. So you see Buddhist expression. There's a whole history of Indian Buddhist art, which was very attractive to me, starting from Ajanta. And that also connected to comics, as I said earlier. And so I thought, and there was one more influence, which is coming from manga, which is Osamu Tezuka's masterpiece, Life of the Buddha. It's called Buddha. And
so that's in a comic art form.
Comic form, yeah. It's manga. It's manga. So he did a manga, Life of the Buddha, in 8 volumes, more than 3,000 pages. And it was published in English around the time when I was starting to look into all this. So I happened to read that. And in fact, it's one of them, it's still in print, published by HarperCollins.
Is it available in India?
It's available all over. Every bookshop will have it.
Really?
Like if you go to, Bari Sons here in Chandigarh, you will find. Okay. 8 volumes, Buddha. And I would highly recommend anybody starting out.
Yes, I'm going to go get it.
Yeah, absolutely. You should.
Just the thing is that people, like even me, I didn't know about this whole thing, and
Yeah. People don't, it is not publicized enough. That is the thing. But it's been there, and it sells well. It's still in print, so people do buy. When they're looking for some interesting material, Buddha is a good, because Buddha, we know it's Indian. It's our Indian past, but it's done by Japanese manga artist. And reading that, I thought it was revelatory, because here was somebody who's doing the life of the Buddha in a way that was not preachy, was not pedagogic, like Amar Chitkatha was. Like they want, you want to educate. It was not, but he's trying to explore the character of the man. So it's a kind of a character study. And Buddha has so many moments of doubt and self-doubt and anxiety, and so he humanizes.
And then it would be much more relatable than just the Eightfold Path.
Exactly. So he's struggling with his inner demons. And so that, one can always relate to that. So I thought it was a fantastic. I think it's a masterpiece in comics art. I'm sure many other critics would have said the same thing. So I read that. So then I thought I should do a kind of a complementary book to that, where I'm actually going to the historical sites, because he didn't go to the historical. He did the story, and he put in he did the fiction. So, and fiction contains all kinds of material. He invents characters. He did many things, innovative things in his version. So I thought I should do the counter to that, which is a non-fiction travelogue, going to the actual places, and which you can do in comics, uh, and nobody had done till then. So I thought this is a great idea, and that's how I started to do this comic.
And so, okay, I'm sure we're running out of
You're
time.
running out of time, yeah.
But because I know that there are still some questions in my head. So, what now? What in the future?
What now? Personally, I'm working on a couple of other book length projects. I've not started anything yet, but I've been doing short works, short pieces. But a big project is something that I'm starting to work on, which is to do with Gandhi.
That's a great idea.
So there's Buddha, and then now there's Gandhi. It's a kind of of course, it's a progression. And now I'm interested in this contemporary man who is also very, of course, has become a much reviled figure, a controversial figure, also critiqued a lot from all sides.
Nobody knew about Gandhi except from that film.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That was a recent quote from our honorable Prime Minister. But yes, so therefore, as in the graphic form, it is a way for me to try and expand the medium, to
and expand yourself.
Expand myself. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's my own kind of a dialogue with Gandhi.
I love that I mean, that's the way to be. That's the way we are meant to be. That you don't think about who's going to, whether you need to make something with the market or, according to what people would like, but you do it from your journey and what is the next step.
Yeah.
And any historian, I suppose, should do that at least.
Should do that.
Yeah, and you also making history, and you're lucky. I'm envious of you to be in a space to be able to make history in a medium that people haven't, not in India.
Yeah.
And you're also, making your own history.
Yeah. So all these things kind of come together.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful impulse.
Right.
That's the way we should be.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So surely it's something that it comes, at least that's the seed of the motivation. It's coming from my own curiosity and need to engage with the past. Want to engage with the past, and of course, even politically, that becomes important, because the past is always dragged into the contemporary discourse. And so we better
and you can, of course, but you really can't lie in visuals, right?
This is an interesting idea, that you can't lie in visuals. I'm not so sure.
You can, but it shows then.
It shows.
Blatantly.
And so there is something to that, something to visuals that it shows. You can't lie in visuals. This is a strong idea that I've even in the cinema.
The camera shows.
Yeah. You say that, right? But of course, this is a debate that one can devote an entire another episode to.
Another episode too.
But yeah, so when you draw, there's something that particularly in cartooning, it was always seen as a medium that kind of revealed revealed some sort of truth. Right from the beginning, that's how cartoonists saw themselves, because they wanted to show the stuff that is not being, one could see, but it's not represented.
And you mentioned earlier, when we were talking earlier, that people are scared, not very.
Yeah, it's so there is a kind of a what do you call,
Fear,
yeah,
reticence.
So among artists, those who are engaged in art and design, the idea that cartooning, because cartooning has this power, in fact, it's an acknowledgement of the power of cartooning, that it has the power to disturb the status quo, and with a very simple drawing. So it's an absolute expression of freedom.
Yeah.
In fact, you can it's almost like a meter. You can gauge the freedom in a society by what kind of cartooning is acceptable, to what extent. So and it offends. It can offend. It can offend. And
Truth
in a good fellow,
offends.
yeah, truth offends in that kind of sense. So even this anthology, coming back to my own work, the anthology magazine that I do is called Vérité, which means truth in French. So it's a Latinate word, where it comes from veritas. But yeah, so Vérité is truth. And in fact, I was thinking of this movement of cinema verite, which was
I know.
from the 60s. So it's a kind of a, so I was thinking at that time of a comics verite, verite in comics. But certainly this notion of truth telling, ideas of freedom that cartooning and comics kind of give a space to. They become expressions of truth telling, the satirizing of power, speaking truth to power, so to speak. All of that.
And in the written word, the person who write, there's a whole spectrum of politics. Like, you say it like it is, and there is a kind of a impulse, ki sunana hai, kind of a thing. It can come down to that. But in art, and as yet, of course, I don't know about Japan, but here we haven't reached that stage of graphic art and cartoons and comics that have, that kind of politics has come in.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Lakshman was such a kindly.
Yeah. Lakshman, I mean, was completely blunt.
Blunt, but very kindly.
Yeah. As in, blunt is not blunt as being straight, but
yeah, in his, and it's
it
possible.
was not a sharp,
It's possible because nobody's nitpicking and picking out the way this guy turns his head, like in words you can.
So Lakshman made a very kind of benevolent.
Benevolent, kindly, yes. Yeah.
Not really offending anybody, actually.
But you have a laugh, and even the person it's made on will have a laugh.
We'll have a laugh.
But anyway, that's a separate thing.
Separate thing.
Yeah.
Separate thing.
So yeah, your ambitions.
My ambitions. Well, that's to do more comics for sure, and to be able to create a larger ecosystem where comics readership becomes a normal thing for everybody, and that it becomes something that people do in schools, people do as you grow up, that it is a medium that one is in touch with throughout your life. just as you're in touch with literature. You might read, as a child, you might read children's books, and then you graduate to other kinds of books, and then you read fat novels and poetry, and but there is a gradual.
Yes, but it starts with the
yeah, but the same thing can be done with comics.
Yeah.
You can have children's comics and comics that are more and more complex as you grow up.
Yeah, and talk about you at every age you are in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, there are even magazines in Japan which are for senior citizens, comics magazines.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Like
you could do that for me.
Why not? I mean, that should exist.
That should
Why
exist.
not? Yeah. So the stories are generally they feature older people and issues related to life as an older person. And so, yeah.
So the one thing I kind of take away with me is that it's about truth.
Yeah.
Even when you're a little child, if that is, acknowledged.
Yeah.
Your drawings are acknowledged.
Right.
And at your age or for senior citizens, it's a pathway to truth.
Yeah. It is a huge thing. I think we really underestimate this connection between this drawing and
words are hopeless. There's so much, there's politicized so much that in our theater also we use gibberish.
Right.
At places.
Right.
Because,
use gibberish as a tool.
Because words, can be misinterpreted, interpreted, taken away somewhere, torn apart.
Yeah. Yeah. But with the drawing, with comics, of course, you use words, but the words are, in fact, speech. They're visual representations of speech.
I mean, like, still.
So it is linked with the visual. So, so the cartoon comes as a single visual. You don't separate the word from
and you don't know how to separate
you can't
as
separate.
yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll learn. But as yet you don't know.
But then there's always a cartoon that can counter that,
I know.
So because the cartooning exists in this kind of in-between space. It's between words, pictures. It's not even fully a picture. It's not fully words.
But it is authentic expression.
It is authentic expression. I would say that for sure. It is an authentic expression. And then certainly this idea of truth is a huge part of it.
So very quickly, what do you teach? What does your teaching involve in Srishti?
It involves teaching comics. So it's a space that has given me that opportunity to teach comics.
And a lot of young people the opportunity to learn comics. Which you did not have when you were growing up.
I did not have, but now it's there, which is a good thing, which is a step up for sure. And also animation and also film related, even screenplay writing.
Yeah.
So these storyboarding, those kind of techniques and methods to use it. You could use them in cinema, you could use them in comics, you could use them in animation. So these common techniques that can be applicable on all these
and
spaces.
You create writers that draw.
Writers that draw.
That is immense.
And it's not my
line, I know, but it is a very
but it's a line that I deeply connect.
Yeah, I can see
the writer who draws.
Anyway, thank you so much. We haven't talked enough.
Yeah.
We need another podcast or whatever.
Sure.
We will do when some of your future starts or whenever. When there's another milestone or a landmark or
definitely
something in your life.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Hopefully.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So much. Yeah.
I'm so honored. And I've learned so much today.
Thank
you guys.
एक छोटी मोटी कप कोई बात प्यारी प्यारी जाए दिल में जो छाप आज कर गपशप कोई बात ले चला कुछ मुझे सीख कुछ मुझको सिखा विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे विड़यावड़ मेरे